Up, everybody? Welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 99, and we are here to recap Week 11. And the coaching carousel is gotten well underway. I want to say not really the most surprising thing in the world, but I'm sure if you all are listening to this now, you probably already heard that Jimbo Fisher is fired as Texas A&M head football coach, and they're paying every dime of a nearly $77 million buyout. And obviously they'll be already well underway looking for the next football coach. I think there's a lot of debate among people within the college football world about what quality of job A&M is. I think a lot of people are misunderstood and don't realize what an elite job this is. And people say, well, they haven't had like a crazy amount of success. Like you look at their program history over the last 25, 30 years, and they don't have an overwhelming amount of success. But this is one of the premier jobs in college football with the resources that they have at their disposal. They have all the resources they need to win national championships, to be a perennial contender. And I think this is one of the most sought after head coaching jobs in the country, without a doubt. I think people misunderstand it a little bit. So I just kind of want to, kind of put our thoughts out there immediately. Like this is one of the top, 5 or 6 jobs in the country. And if they can nail this hire, then there's no reason that they're not going to be a perennial contender, compete for national championships, compete for SEC championships, because there are no external factors that are hindering Texas A&M. So the reason they haven't been able to reach, that level of success they want yet is not because of resources or recruiting or anything like that. It's just because they haven't hired the right head coach. If they can do that this time around, Texas A&M is going to be right there with some of the top dogs in college football, and I really expect that to happen. I think they're going to make the right hire this time around, because there's really no reason not to. They have everything available at their disposal. So it's going to be really interesting to see that. I'm going to get your thoughts. We also got to get into Zach Arnett being fired as Mississippi State head coach earlier this morning. We're recording this Monday night, so early Monday morning, Zach Arnett's out at Mississippi State. There's kind of some rumblings or people, talking about, is Arkansas going to make a change? I think it's kind of on the fence. A lot of people are saying Sam Pittman could be gone. He could be retained. So that's kind of seems to be up in the air right now. There's not really any intel on that, but wouldn't be surprised at either move there. So this coaching carousel is firing on all cylinders here in mid-November. So give me your thoughts on Jimbo being out at A&M, kind of what you expect there, and then obviously Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. It's already gotten crazy here early in November.
Well, what's really funny is that if you played or if you coached in on Kyle Field Saturday night, you're not coaching no more this year. Both of them coaches that played each other, both of them, they got the boot the next day or the Monday after. So I think you're 100% right with A&M being a top perennial job in college football, especially in the conference. We heard Nick Saban talk about when the portal first came about and then NIL first got rolling. Nick Saban said the rich are going to get richer, and 100% that's what happened. Obviously, he meant that figuratively, as in the good teams are going to get better, and then the worst teams are not going to be. They're not going to benefit as much as the teams that are fighting for a national championship or a conference championship every year. But he also meant that literally, because the highest payout before Jimbo Fisher this weekend was Gus Malzahn. It was like $22 million or something along those lines, $21 million. This buyout has beat Gus Malzahn's buyout by $50 million plus. So 100% they got the resources. In today's college football, that's not everything, but it is a lot of the things. If you got money, you're going to be able to recruit well. You're going to be able to have the facilities to compete with anybody else in the country, no matter what league that you play in. So if you've got money, you're already set up to be successful. I agree. They just don't have the right guy. If this was 10, 12 years ago, I think Jimbo was the perfect hire. I think he's a little outdated as it comes to coaching college football in today's world. Um, there's not been many coaches that were successful 10 to 12 years ago that are still successful today as head coaches. They don't have a job anymore. They're analysts. Nick Saban is one of the few. I believe he may be the only one that was super successful 10, 12 years ago that is successful today because of how he learned to adapt, and he realized, man, I don't like it, but I like winning above all else. There's nothing I like more than winning. So I'm going to have to adapt whether it goes against what I believe or not. And he has done a great job of that. You can take people like Dabo Swinney, for example. He was successful 10, 12 years ago, and now he is not saying he's not successful, but he's definitely not to the caliber that you want to be to win now and be that top dog head coach. Kirby Smart, there's some things that he said that he doesn't love big time about today's college football, but he's adapting because, again, he likes winning above all else. You take Lane Kiffin. He's had some things to say that go against the portal and the NIL, but he's the self-proclaimed portal king, and he understands what it takes. And he said after the game against Georgia, he's like, man, it's tough to compete with guys who sign 24 5-stars when we sign 1 5-star. He said he wasn't blaming the players. He was just being realistic. I mean, it's 100%. If you can go out and get the players, you have a much higher chance of being successful. And so I think that A&M has done all of that except for get the right guy to get the right kind of product on the field. We talked about when Jimbo got hired a few years ago that we thought it might have been a swing and miss just because of the outdated nature of his philosophy in today's college football. But, I mean, you called it last week. You said he was going to be gone. I said I thought he might have one more year just because the check was so high. But, I mean, hell, what's $77 million to $55 million next year or whatever it was going to be? Like, might as well ride it now. I mean, they flown the check at halftime this past week with a donor, $165 million or $146 million, whatever it was. So, I mean, they got the funds. They got that Texas oil money. Texas is always going to have the big dollars. But I don't know that they have a coach that they know 100% they're going to go out. I'm sure they have a couple people in mind who they're going to go after, but I don't think they have a 100% lock on who's going to be their next coach right now. I just think that they wanted to get a head start, jump on it, especially with the new portal window only being 30 days. That's going to affect some of the players leaving, and that's going to affect getting guys in or keeping guys there. So you want to get the hire as quick as you can. You want to be the first ones to jump on that in the new coaching carousel this year. I think that Zach Arnett, switching lanes to Zach Arnett, I think that they took a shot with after Mike Leach passed last year, keeping it in-house, Then they took a shot with him. Cam said before we started recording, he said it was he felt like it was an interim title without being an interim title. So I think they took a shot just to see if it would work, and they saw quickly this is not going to work. His philosophy, he is not ready to coach at the SEC level, and so they got him out of there. I don't think it's any bad blood between the program and him. I just think they knew that if they didn't do it now, they were going to be behind the 8 ball for a while. Probably props to them because they would have had a Harsin type deal. He hasn't been recruiting super well. Obviously, the performance on the field hasn't been great. I don't feel like he used the talents that he had and the abilities that his players had to the best of his ability. I mean, you got a quarterback that can sling it all around the field, and you want to be a run-first team. And I get it. You got to establish the run game, but use what you got right now. And it's your first year, man. I mean, the dude didn't even make it a full calendar year as the head coach. So they jumped on it quick. And I think it's going to be much harder to get a hire there than it is at Texas A&M because of the quality of the job. Whatever anybody wants to say, you're 100% right. Texas A&M is a top job in the SEC, in the nation, just because of the facilities they got and the deep pockets that they got, man. They can go out and get anybody. They've proven it the last few years. They can recruit extremely well. They just got to get that guy who can get the product on the field to match the recruiting and the off-the-field stuff that's going on down there.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the last few weeks, and I think really one of the biggest factors in this, you mentioned the portal window that's coming up. Obviously, I think that played a huge factor in this, to go ahead and get a head start on this where, um, you can hopefully have a head coach in place to not only keep guys on your roster, but to be able to, add guys as well for next year's team. And then the other two factors for me that I think is just continue to ramp up this pressure on these programs to make moves are obviously the 12-team playoff and conference realignment, especially in Texas A&M's case. They've been the only SEC school in Texas since they joined, obviously, and then now you got Texas coming in next year. With you see the success they're having under Steve Sarkisian. They're a playoff contender, the favorite right now to win the Big 12. So you see the success that they're having, and the kind of resources they have are right there with Texas A&M's. They both have a lot of money, and recruiting's not going to be a factor as long as they've got the right guy in place. So I think Texas joining ramped up on that as well. You also have Oklahoma joining the SEC, who's in that same region as well. So it's only going to get tougher from here. And I just think this product, it's not going to, like, everybody realizes it's not going to get any better. Like, at this point, it's year 6. It is what it is. Like, what's going to happen if you let this rock on another year? You're going to be sitting this time next year likely in the same scenario. And you're going to be a year behind what you could have been if you didn't make the move. So, I think obviously 77 million, regardless of how much money you have, is tough to swallow. But I think they realize, like, we're not going to let that be a factor. Winning is the top priority, and they're going to move mountains to make that happen. And they proved it clearly. So I'm really curious to see how this search goes. We've already seen a lot of names thrown out. Billy Lucci at Texags, who was the guy who actually broke this story that they were going to fire Jimbo Fisher yesterday. I was reading through some of his Twitter thread and stuff, and Lane Kiffin's name's been thrown out there. And according to him, he said that Lane is not really going to get consideration for the job. And that's from him. He's the one who kind of broke the story. So I obviously holds a lot of weight. So, I thought Kiffin would be, a top contender for this, but according to him, I don't know if that's the case. Obviously, these things change, but you don't make a $77 million, move like this and get rid of Jimbo Fisher without a pretty strong plan in place of, hey, this is option A, this is option B, this is option C. Like, you don't just write a $77 million check and not have a plan to what you're going to do after that. These moves are well thought out, if you've got, competent people running the operation. So I would expect it to move pretty quickly because, like I said, you're going to have a plan when you've made that kind of commitment. So I'm really curious, though, to see, where this search kind of leads. I think a guy like Mike Elko can make a lot of sense. He's done a really good job at Duke. He's been at Texas A&M before. I think that's a guy that can make a lot of sense. Obviously, Dan Lanning at Oregon's a hot name right now. The way he's been able to recruit. He's a young guy. He's got ties in the SEC. He's coached under Nick Saban. He's coached under Kirby Smart. So that's a guy that would make a lot of sense. I'm curious to see if somebody like a Lance Leipold, who's done an excellent job at Kansas, I don't know if it'll be this job, but I do think if he wants a higher, Power 5 job, I think that opportunity is going to be out there for him this cycle if that's what he wants, if the right job's there for him. So there's quite a few names I think they're going to be in the mix. You've heard Jeff Traker at UTSA as a hot name in the group of 5 ranks. I think there's going to be a lot of strong candidates for this job. I mean, as we, said already, it's a top 5 or 6 job by far in college football. And like I said too, it's not necessarily you can say, it hasn't been a top 5 or 6 program over the last 20 years, and that's true. But when you just look at the job itself, there's no doubt that it's a top 5 job. So, I'm really curious to see how this search goes. But I would expect it to move pretty quickly. because of the factors we mentioned earlier with the portal window and things of that nature. They're going to want to move this along as quickly as possible. And then with Mississippi State, you mentioned obviously Zach Arnett taking over in really unfortunate circumstances last year with Mike Leach passing away. I feel like the school felt that it was best to kind of turn that over to him. It was a tough time for the program, obviously, and just weeks after that happened, doing a national search, it just I don't think it would have sat right, really. So Zach Arnett, yeah, as I said too, it just felt like this was more of a interim type of deal, even though he was the legitimate head coach, but it just never felt like it was 100% his, like they were committing to him for the long term. I think if he would have really overachieved this year, I think he would have got another opportunity, but obviously that hasn't been the case. So I'm curious to see where they go here as well. If they look at some guys at the group of 5 ranks, as we mentioned earlier, a guy like Lance Leipold, I mentioned at Kansas. I'm curious if Dan Mullen gets a call. Obviously, he's doing, TV right now. He's had about as much success as anybody at Mississippi State, has had it certainly in recent memory. So I'm curious to see if there's any, thought to that, or if that even becomes a rumor. So going to be really interesting to see. As far as Sam Pittman at Arkansas, could see that one going either way. I would not be surprised if they didn't make a move there as well. As I said, these factors of the 12-team playoff, conference realignment, portal opening soon, I think it's just ramped up that pressure for these programs just that much more than usual.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking on the Texas A&M, who's going to get the next job? I heard Pat Smith talking today on the Jocks Radio. His word holds a lot of weight. He was a big part of starting the Paul Feinbaum show and getting that thing up and going. So his word does hold a lot of weight. He knows a lot of people. And he said with the Texas A&M people he's been talking to and that he's heard from, he's saying that there's a potential that they try to keep it a Texas A&M guy, like keep it a guy that's been there, that has ties to Texas A&M. And one of the names that he said was Aaron Glenn, who is the defensive coordinator at the Lions. He's an alma mater, is at Texas A&M. He played there. He's a little older guy, not old, but he's an older man. And he understands how it works down there in Texas A&M. He's got Texas ties, obviously. He's done a good job at where he's at right now. But going from the NFL to college is a lot different because of the recruiting and things along those lines, especially today's world with the money involved. And it's, 365, 100%. There's no off days. So there were some talks from Pat Smith there. So, keep an eye on that. I think Dan Lanning is obviously the hottest name for any job opening right now because of what he's done at Oregon, what he did while he was at Georgia. I think he is a fantastic coach. He's a young guy, so wherever he goes, they can potentially lock him up for the rest of his career if he's successful there and he enjoys it there because he is so young. I think that there's been a lot of rumblings about Lanning being the next guy in Tuscaloosa when Saban does eventually decide to retire. And if that is the case, and that does hold some weight, that is true, then it would be smart for Texas A&M to go get Dan Lanning now, offer him the kitchen sink, do whatever you got to do to get him in Texas A&M, so he doesn't leave and go to Tuscaloosa when Saban retires. Get ahead of that and get a jump start on that. That would be smart. But I'm sure they've got their guys they're looking for. Obviously, you mentioned Jeff Traylor at UTSA for sure. He's done a great job. He understands the recruiting cycle down there in Texas. He's got relationships built down there. So, I mean, anything that we're saying, they've probably already thought of 10 different times and have other people. I think the Mississippi State job, like I said earlier, is going to be tougher to fill. I think Dan Mullen is probably a good candidate to potentially have a second stint there at Mississippi State. I believe he left just for Florida, and that was, he was coming home at Florida. So I don't think he would definitely turn it away because the expectations at Texas A&M are so much different than the expectations at Mississippi State. So there's not a whole lot of, and at Florida, there's not a whole lot of griping and complaining going on if you're just competitive and you win 8-9 games a year, which he was able to do. He did have Dak Prescott there and a couple good stables of running backs, but he was the ones who got him there, and he built that program, and then it's kind of fallen to the ashes since he's gone. But I think you're right about Sam Pittman. I don't know that it'll be this week or next week, but I think it's going to be tough to keep him there. He's really only had one good year. I like Sam Pittman a lot, but I think it's going to be tough to keep him there with the product that he's put on the field the last few years. And if Sam Pittman were to get fired, I think the hottest name in the coaching carousel is going to be Gus Malzahn. Getting him back at Arkansas. He's from Arkansas, was a coordinator there a long time ago when McFadden was there. Getting him back in the SEC, I think he would love that opportunity. So I think that if Sam Pittman does end up getting the can, I think you can almost guarantee that Gus Malzahn is going to be the first phone that they call.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. I think some guys that make a lot of sense potentially for Mississippi State. If you're looking at more the Group of Five level, I think John Summerall has done an excellent job at Troy. I think he's a candidate that's going to be, in line for, a Power Five type of job if that's what he wants. Same with Rhett Lashley, who's done a really good job at SMU. A guy like Willie Fritz at Tulane has had a lot of success. So I think there's several Group of Five coaches that are going to be in contention for some of these jobs, like a Mississippi State, or if Arkansas comes open. I think some of these candidates would make a lot of sense, and some of these guys have SEC ties. Obviously, Rhett Lashry does. John Summerall was at Kentucky previously, so a lot of these guys have, ties to the South, ties to the SEC. Those are names I'm going to watch to see, if they're obviously. I think they'll be candidates, but if they do make that jump to the Power Five level, so it's going to be really interesting to see. But kind of getting into some Week 11 recaps, obviously had some really interesting games. Thought we had some surprise results, honestly. So kind of jumping into the 11 o'clock games, we'll go ahead and kick it off with Alabama and Kentucky. Obviously this was, considered a trap game potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Terrion Arnold after the game said that they actually had rat traps around the locker room this week. With cheese in them, like, hey, like, don't take the trap, like, don't get caught in the trap, like, all that kind of stuff. So that was a big theme this week. I mean, obviously the game after LSU for Alabama is always tough because you're coming off such a physical, emotional type of win, or game in general. So that next week's always a tough one to flip that page really quick. So but they were able to do that. Obviously came out with a super fast start, got up 21-0. Kind of lost momentum there for a bit. Kool-Aid McKinstry muffed a punt. And then Kentucky was able to put a score on the board, make it 21-7. Thought Jalen Milroe was excellent again. He did have the one, turnover on third down, trying to do a little too much, but I love the way he's been trending over the last, 3 to 4 weeks. Same with Tommy Reese. I mean, I think, as I've said, Tommy Reese been in his bag lately. It's just him and Milroe have just been kind of growing together. I think they found a little something during the bye week because these last two performances have been the best of the year. Obviously, the quarterback run game's been a lot more of a factor and is going to continue to be, I think, down the stretch. Obviously, now that they've clinched the SEC West, and now we know for sure we're getting Alabama and Georgia and Atlanta here in a few weeks. So that quarterback run game is going to have to be a big part of the game plan, going into the Iron Bowl and then obviously the SEC title game. But I like how comfortable Milroe's been in the pocket. Thought he's been making really good decisions for the most part, been accurate with the football. And you can see him going through his reads a lot more comfortably and making, quicker decisions. And then I think he's been a lot more decisive when he does pull it down the run. Just think he's been really, really solid overall. He did get hit, in the first quarter on his thigh. That kind of had him shook up for a little bit. And didn't run the ball quite as much the rest of the game, but was able to have success, throwing the ball from the pocket. And then Alabama's defense, with another really strong performance against Kentucky, made them pretty much one-dimensional. They had one long touchdown run in late in the second half, but for the most part, Ray Davis wasn't a factor at all in this game. They made him one-dimensional and made Devin Leary, try to beat him. Thought they did a really good job of getting pressure on him for the most part as well. So overall, another solid performance and just kind of continuing on that trajectory that they've showed, over the last month or month and a half. And really since that USF game and the Texas loss, they've just kind of steadily been improving and kind of trending uphill, if you will. And obviously it's the perfect time to be doing that. That's what your championship contenders, that's what they do this time of year. They just gradually ascend and start playing their best football in November and December and obviously January. So really good to see. Got Chattanooga this week. Obviously a little bit of a tune-up for the Iron Bowl in rivalry week. And then obviously the SEC championship after that. But what were your thoughts kind of from this Alabama-Kentucky game?
It went about how I expected. I took Alabama minus, what was it, 14 and a half, 13 and a half, whatever it was.
I think it was like 10 and a half or 11, I think.
Yeah, it might have been 11. I think I took them at 11. It went about it how I expected. Offense came out firing. Absolutely firing on all cylinders. They played a pretty flawless game, had a few mistakes, but nothing major, nothing to get them beat. I thought the defense, again, just hats off to the defense, hats off to Kevin Steele. Every single week it's like they get better and better and better, which is what's expected and what you need to happen. But, man, they played with their hair on fire. They were on the quarterback. Like you said, they contained the run game fairly well for the most part. They talked about in the broadcast, Jalen Milroe and Tommy Reese have been meeting together one-on-one a little longer throughout the week and more consistently throughout the week. And Tommy Reese told Jalen Milroe, if there's something you don't like, let me know. I'll take it out of the playbook or we'll work on it and see if we can't get to where you're comfortable with it. But he said, if you're not comfortable with it, let me know. And he's given Milroe a little bit more responsibility in the play calls and in the game planning. So it makes him, they were saying it makes him, feel a little more like he's in control or whatever. And then he not that you care anymore, you're going to care regardless, but that he feels like he has a bigger role in it. He's taking a little more responsibility. And so that's obviously going to make him play better and make the guys around him play better because he's more comfortable in the pocket, more comfortable on the field. I think if he doesn't get hurt and get a little dead leg in that game, he probably runs for a little bit more, but ran for 3, threw for 3. I don't know how much more you can ask from him. First quarterback in Alabama history to do that. So he set history or made history on Saturday. But again, we talked about last week, this potentially could be a trap game, and they came out fired on all cylinders. They weren't worried about Kentucky's not that good. We can roll over them easily. They played their A game and they dominated and they did exactly what they were supposed to do. They took care of business. And like you said, they're peaking at the right time. I think if they play Texas now, it's a different game. A healthy Quinn Ewers, I think, there's no telling. Texas still may end up beating them, but it's definitely not the same type of game that we saw week 2. Jalen Milroe is 100% a 10 times better quarterback than he was week 2. He's progressing through his reads. He looks comfortable in the pocket. He's moving around in the pocket. And if he doesn't see something that he likes, he'll take off with it. We didn't see that a lot early in the season. We also didn't see a lot of design quarterback runs that we've talked about a couple of times on the podcast. So you thought they needed to get more and more of those. And I agree with you. And they've eventually moved into that and morphed their offense into that, where they're allowing him to take responsibility and to take off with the football. They're designing some quarterback runs, and that makes the offense so much more dynamic and tougher to stop and giving the defense a bunch of different looks. And I think he's progressed as a quarterback 1,000,000% because he looks like a completely different guy than he did the first 3 or 4 weeks that he was playing. You talked about the USF game. He wasn't in there playing, so obviously it's a completely different offense without Jalen Milroe in there. Nobody else has the ability to take off and run like he does. It's on Alabama's quarterback room. So he 100% makes that offense roll. And I'm pleased with how they're using him now. They weren't using him to his fullest ability early in the season, but now they are. And man, they really look unstoppable. Obviously, everybody is beatable and everybody can get got on any given Saturday, but this SEC championship is going to be a fun one. Both them and Georgia locked it in this weekend with wins. So another Alabama Georgia matchup that we've seen the last few years are always good. They're always exciting, and this one's going to stack up to be another one. Georgia's got a little bit of injuries on the defensive side of the ball, so there's some younger guys playing right now. Maybe they'll be healthy. Their starters will be healthy by the time the SEC championship game rolls around. But if not, this is going to be a really, really fun game to watch down in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I just want to comment on it for a minute. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to dive much into it now because we'll have plenty of time, obviously, as it gets closer. But just kind of talking about Alabama a little bit in the grand scheme of things. But the way the playoff is shaking up, obviously, this SEC championship game between Alabama and Georgia, the games we've seen, they've always been like a playoff game. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's always been either a play-in game or either both teams make the playoffs. But this year, with the amount of teams that we still have left in this, I mean, obviously, just to kind of lay it out simply, you're going to have more than likely an undefeated Big Ten champ, whether that's Ohio State or Michigan, and the other one's going to have one loss. You could very possibly have an undefeated Washington, or at worst, probably have a one-loss Washington and a one-loss Oregon. You could very likely have an undefeated Florida State, who's an ACC champ. Then you could have a one-loss Texas Big 12 champ. And then if Alabama wins the SEC title, you have a one-loss Alabama SEC champ and a one-loss Georgia. So, I mean, really, honestly, at this point, only one SEC team probably at the most is getting in. I honestly don't see both of them making it.
No.
So, like, the game 2 years ago, obviously Alabama had to win to make it in, but Georgia lost and obviously still made it in. So, but I don't think that's the case this year, and that's only going to ramp up things that much more. I mean, this is a legit playoff game like the losers, more than likely. I mean, Alabama's definitely out if they lose. And then Georgia, with the amount of teams that are still left in it with one-loss conference champions you're going to have left in the mix, a one-loss Georgia is probably going to be out as well. So it's going to be crazy, honestly. I just kind of want to lay that scenario because that's what everybody's been talking about the last week or so, the hypothetical scenarios of what's kind of going to be laid out in front of us. That's why I'm really curious to see this week. You got Washington playing at Oregon State. You got Texas playing at Iowa State. So I just feel there's some upsets on the horizon. We've been so close the last few weeks. It's like we've been teased here the last few weeks. Yeah. I just feel like with the parity around college football, I'll just be stunned if we don't have a few upsets here in the final couple of weeks. It feels like we've been so close to that, even though, a lot of upsets haven't happened yet. But I feel like we're on the verge, and with the playoff scenario shaping up the way that it is, it's going to be crazy interesting here the last couple of weeks.
100%. I want to talk about this Missouri-Tennessee game. I took Missouri +1, so pretty much took their money line. I took their money line also, but I took their +1 in a parlay. Parlay hit, by the way, big payday. But I really did think that Missouri was going to win this game, but I did not think they were going to win this game in the fashion that they did. I did say last week on the podcast that I didn't think that Tennessee was going to be able to run the ball as well as they had been all season, and I was proven right. I mean, Tennessee only had 83 rushing yards. They had to lean on Joe Milton a little bit to throw the ball, and he threw it all right. I mean, he had 267 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, but like you said, this is not the Hendon Hooker offense of last year. They can't just throw it all over you. So if you were able to stuff their run game, you had a really good chance of beating them. And Missouri did just that, man. I mean, they were on them like white on rice when they handed the football off. Missouri played a phenomenal game. They had a pick six late in the game that really solidified and sealed the deal, put them up by 5 scores or 4 scores, whatever it was. But Missouri ran the ball like everyone expected Tennessee to run the ball. They had 255 rushing yards, average 5 a pop with 2 touchdowns on the ground. And Brady Cook, he pretty much matched Joe Milton and 275 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. So they relied heavily on their run game. Cody Schrader, absolute dog, D2 All-American, coming up to D1 like it ain't nothing. 35 carries. I mean, every play they ran, it seemed like they handed it off to him. 35 carries, 205 yards, and a touchdown. That man can ball. Missouri is 100% on the up and up under Drink. And like I said last week, I think that Georgia is getting some hate on the games that they're winning, even though they're playing really good teams. It's just the logo is not a really good team in the past. Georgia should get a little more credit for beating Missouri last week by only 9, or 2 weeks ago by only 9, when they come out and they absolutely dominate Tennessee to a 36-7 thumping. I mean, this Missouri team is legit. I mean, they took LSU down to the wire. They played Georgia really great. They dominated Tennessee. They beat Florida pretty bad. They beat Kentucky, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but the games that they've won, they have dominated in fashions. They've relied on their defense to win them games. They've relied on their offense to win them games. They're a really, really, really balanced team. I think Drinkwitz is doing a fantastic job. I think this year for Drinkwitz is going to only improve the recruiting cycles that he's going to have down there at Missouri. He was able to get a 5-star last year. I think the 4 and 5 stars are going to start rolling in there. Maybe not 5, 6 a year, but I think he's going to be able to snag 1 or 2 every single cycle, and then eventually build it to 5 or 6 a year. So I'm more than pleased with Drinkwitz and what he's done with this Missouri program this year. Brady Cook is playing lights out. He's gotten better. And we talk about Jalen Milroe getting better and better each week. Brady Cook has done nothing but shock the world, honestly. I mean, everybody knew that he was a good quarterback, but I don't think anybody expected him to have the year that he's having this year. And, I mean, he's leading this Missouri offense. They're fantastic. You talked about last week, Luther Burden takes a backseat to absolutely nobody in the league. The dude's a dog. They have exceeded every single expectation this year. They're going to get a really good bowl game, not a New Year's Six or anything like that, but they're going to get a really good bowl game this year. And I'm excited to see how where this Missouri team ends up, because they are trending big time. They're trending up big time.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about they're likely going to finish 10-2 and potentially 11-win season, which would just be monumental. I mean, Eli Drinkwitz, that's SEC Coach of the Year, if you ask me. I mean, if I have a vote, that's who I'm voting for. I mean, you nailed it, man. I mean, this was absolute thumping that I did not see coming at all. I mean, I was like you. I felt like Missouri would win this game, but I didn't expect it in this kind of fashion. I mean, it was just a Cody Schrader show. There's nothing else to say. I mean, he, I believe, became the first SEC player ever to have 200 rushing yards and over 100 receiving yards in a game.
Yeah,
I'm pretty positive. So you mentioned 35 carries, 205 yards, 5 receptions, 116 yards. I mean, he just completely dominated the stat sheet, dominated Tennessee. Tennessee could not run the ball. I mean, a team that's been a run-first team all year could not run the ball against Missouri. Yeah, and it was a beatdown, and that's all you can say, really. Just give Missouri a ton of credit. They've obviously had some really good wins this year. They beat Kansas State early on in the year. That's a solid football team. Obviously beat Kentucky pretty soundly, beat South Carolina soundly, beat Tennessee soundly. So they've got some really good wins. Played Georgia about as tough as anybody has this year. So yeah, they've really had a monumental season. Honestly, I think they're going to close it strong. They've got Florida at home this week, and then they have Arkansas to end the regular season. So they've got a real chance to win 10, 11 games, and that would be just monumental for Eli Drinkwitz in this program.
Absolutely. I want to touch on Auburn and Arkansas. Auburn played phenomenal.
Talk about another beatdown.
Jesus, I mean, I thought that Sam Pittman was going to get the can after this game just because of how bad Arkansas performed following such a high emotional win. And that maybe played something into it of they're coming off that emotional roller coaster last week with the ups and downs and fighting back at the end. But I said when we were doing the previews on Auburn that they were probably going to lose 4 in a row. And in the heart of their schedule, they lost 4 in a row. In 5 weeks, they had a bye week in between the 2 losses, but they lost 4 in a row in 5 weeks. And then they followed it up with Mississippi State, Vandy, and Arkansas. They've won all 3 of those as they should have. They've won them all pretty handily, and they're peaking. They're on the up and up. They are peaking right now. Going bowling, got bowl eligible with this win this weekend. I mean, absolutely played out of their minds. Every expectation that anybody had for them going into this week, Auburn fan or not, they exceeded it for sure. Ran the ball extremely well. I mean, absolutely ran the ball extremely well. Finally giving Jarquez a bunch of carries. Let's see, he had 16 carries for 109 yards. I mean, Peyton Thorne ran the ball well. He threw the ball well. Auburn didn't really have to throw the ball all that much. He did throw for 3 touchdowns, but they just relied on the run game. Defense played out of their minds. But I said that they would probably lose 4 games. How would they respond? What kind of leadership would they have on the team? What kind of mindset would they be after they lost 4 in a row? And they have responded about as good as you can ask them to. But there's been a lot of talks on social media, and a bunch of Auburn fans are talking like, oh, Auburn's peaking at the right time. We got the Iron Bowl in 2 weeks. It's at home. You never know what could happen, which all of that is 100% correct. But like I said during the preview this year, I have been victim of the Auburn hype my whole entire life and bought into it and been part of it. Auburn has not beat LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M 3 weeks in a row. They have beat the 3 worst SEC teams 3 weeks in a row, as they should have. So I think that the hype that's the Iron Bowl is getting, which the Iron Bowl is always going to get hype, no matter if both teams have no wins. But the exceeded hype that it's getting of Auburn's going to win or Auburn's going to upset them. Again, anything can happen. 2 years ago, they took Bama to 4 overtimes with TJ Finley at quarterback. Anything can happen. But the hype is, I said at the preview I was going to be realistic. And I've stayed true to that all year. I haven't really got down in the dumps too bad because of what's expected. I've been realistic, and I'm being realistic now. Yes, Auburn is peaking at the right time, but everybody's acting like Alabama's falling off the freaking table. Alabama is peaking at the same time as Auburn, and they look a lot better doing it. And they're doing it against a lot better teams, the same teams that beat the crap out of Auburn. So pump your brakes, Auburn fans. Don't go jumping off the rooftop if Auburn loses the Iron Bowl by 3 or 4 scores, because it's a very high possibility that it'll happen. I think the defense is going to give Alabama offense some fits early. I don't think that they're going to be able to hang in all 4 quarters. We've talked about the lack of depth on Auburn's roster, and just rosters matching up with the high caliber rosters that they've played this year. It's just they're not there. Auburn is not there yet, and so I think that Auburn is going to play them tough. It's the Iron Bowl. It always happens. They're going to be juiced. They're going to be amped. Yeah, I think Auburn gives them a good game for a half. I really do. But I don't think that they're going to be able to hang with them for 4 quarters. And I love the hype. And I hope it turns out to be true. I really, really do. I would love nothing more than to fully put a dagger in Alabama's playoff hopes. As an Auburn fan, that would be my Christmas gift. I would love it more than anything to finally just end their playoff hopes once and for all. Even if they win the SEC championship, there's no way if they lose to Texas and Auburn that they're getting in. It's just not. We just talked about all the teams that are still available. I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm being realistic. Bama is peaking. Their offense looks great. I just said they look unstoppable. They pretty much are unstoppable these last few weeks. So Auburn fans, don't get your panties in a wad when Alabama comes in and more than likely beats Auburn by 2 or 3 scores, because that's probably what's going to happen. Be realistic. Auburn's going bowling in Hugh Freeze's first year. That is a huge win. They're probably going to be 7-5, which is what I said the ceiling would be. And if you toss in a bowl win, that's 8-5. Fantastic year. But just be realistic going into the Iron Bowl in 2 weeks, because the odds are that Bama is probably going to win.
Well, I mean, I agree with what you said. I think overall we've been very honest all year about this Auburn team and kept expectations. I don't think either one of us have been super down or crazy high on them at the same time, because I'm gonna be honest with you, as I've said the last week or two, they're exactly where I expected them to be. Honestly, I mean, they've lost to the teams that they should have lost to, and they've beaten the teams they should have beaten. Like they are exactly where they should be. I don't think anybody should be. I don't want to say, obviously they should be happy with where they're at, because obviously if you're taking care of business, that's what you're supposed to do, and you should be happy about that, absolutely. But at the same time, the games they lost, those were not games they should have won anyway. So you can't really be that upset about the fact that you didn't win those games, but you're not as good as any of those teams right now, and everybody knew that coming in with the way the roster is. So, but these last few weeks, we knew the schedule after that 4-game stretch. You mentioned the schedule got more favorable. We expected them to make up some ground, during this time, and that's exactly what they've done. They've looked a lot better doing it. Part of that's the competition. Part of that is on them. They obviously they're improving. They've steadily improved as the years went along, especially the last few weeks, because they're not doing the change at quarterback as much. Peyton Thorne, I think, has gotten a lot more comfortable. And the offense, obviously, I think Hugh Freeze has had a lot more hands-on with the offense. He's admitted that himself, kind of putting his foot down a little bit and being more, hands-on, as I said, with the offense. So, yeah, really sitting at 6-4 right now is exactly where I expected them. I actually said going into the year, I thought they would get to 8 wins, and they're right on track to be able to do that. So, but like you said, I'm like you. I've seen the same thing too. Auburn fans, getting hyped up about the eye roll, and they should, because honestly, anything can happen. As you mentioned, we saw 2 years ago that was a bad Auburn team that almost beat an Alabama team that went to the national championship. I mean, after that Iron Bowl, nobody gave Alabama a shot to beat Georgia. Everybody said Alabama would get their brakes beat off by Georgia. They go over there and house Georgia. So I mean that was not a good Auburn team that almost beat them. So like you said, you never know, but more times than not, when you're comparing these rosters, 98% of the time Alabama's going to win. I mean, it's just the way it is. But the good thing is we don't play it 100 times. They only play it one time. So that's why you never know. But I'm like you. I do think, I mean, obviously more likely than not, Alabama's going to win, and that's to be expected. I mean, they're, Nick Saban's 17 years into this deal. Hugh Freeze has been there less than a year. So, I mean, you can't expect, it to be on an even playing field. But sometimes that doesn't matter. 60 minutes a lot can happen in 60 minutes. So, I'm like you. I do think it's going to be a really competitive game, because Alabama has not played well in Auburn. I mean, really, they've only had one good performance in the last really 4 or 5 trips down there. So that's one thing for me, is not only do you want to keep your playoff hopes alive, I want to see them go do something that a lot of other really good Alabama teams haven't done, and that's go have a good performance in Jordan-Hare Stadium. I mean, the 2017 team won the national title and played like absolute crap at all. And got smoked by 12. So, so I want to go see them have a really good performance and kind of build upon what they've been doing over the last, back half of the season. But, as far as from Auburn's perspective, like we said, I think they're exactly where they're supposed to be. They've continued to have really good recruiting momentum lately. Got a flip from Florida the other day. Picked up another commit for 2025. I believe it was yesterday. So, they're just continuing on that momentum. So, obviously, everybody should be extremely excited. But at the same time, I feel like they're doing what they're supposed to be, and I feel like they're going to end the year about exactly where they should be when you looked at it from the beginning of the season.
100%, and not taking anything away from Auburn this past weekend. I mean, at one point in the third quarter, it was 41-3. I looked at the scoreboard, and I'm like, this is the end of a game score, and there's a whole nother quarter and 5 minutes to go. Like,
it was a spanking, man. That surprised me. I did not expect, especially Arkansas coming off that Florida win. They got punched in the mouth early, and it was they wobbled early on, and that was all she wrote. I mean, Auburn
Auburn made them
absolutely.
quit 100%. I mean, you can say what you want that Arkansas didn't quit and nobody quits. Arkansas flat out quit. Midway through the second quarter, it was game over. You could have ended it right then. I mean, Auburn was kept clicking on all cylinders, running the ball down their throats, and Arkansas didn't have an answer on offense. Their offensive line, like we've talked about all year, hasn't been great. And Auburn's defense, they took advantage of it. They did a really good job on defense to get a bunch of 3-and-outs to keep the offense on the field. They did a fantastic job. Auburn's offense was able to sustain drives, and damn near every drive they had, they scored. I thought that this was, I said before we started recording, this is one of the most fun games I've experienced as an Auburn fan since about 2017. It's been a long time since I've been able to sit back in the middle of the second quarter, knowing Auburn's going to win the game, and just watching them dominate. That was a lot of fun to see. But again, I'm realistic. The expectations, Auburn is exactly who we thought they were, like you said, and I'm more than pleased with it. I said at the beginning of the year, if Auburn has 7 wins, it is a fantastic year based on where they were the last 2 years. 100% is a fantastic year, especially being behind the 8 ball of where they were, what he's done with this roster, the turnaround that he's made since week 1, 2, and 3. I mean, Auburn looks so much better now. If they go play Ole Miss now, if they go play Georgia now, if they go play Texas A&M now, the results probably not any different, but the product on the field is going to look much different. So I'm very pleased with what Hugh Freeze has done, and I'm very excited and have a positive outlook for the future. But for this season, again, realistic expectations. I told myself I was going to be realistic. I told you guys I was going to be realistic, and that's what I've been. And so that is what it is. But enough on Auburn. We've had our tangent on Auburn. I want to get into this Georgia Ole Miss game. Lord have mercy. I told y'all that Georgia was going to win, that Ole Miss didn't have the guys to stack up with them. I said it was going to be a good game early, but they weren't going to be able to hang with them for 4 quarters. And midway through the second quarter, Ole Miss didn't find the scoreboard again until, I believe, beginning of the fourth when they kicked a field goal or something along those lines. Georgia absolutely dominated these guys. They took care of business. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. They had some younger guys in the secondary for the defense due to some injuries. Ole Miss started out extremely hot. Quinshon Judkins had a really good first half. Ole Miss did about what I expected them to do, go in there and jump on them early, but they were just not able to hang with them, man. I mean, defensive-wise, they were gassed. Georgia was able to run the ball all over them. Again, like you said last week, if you're waiting on Carson Beck to have a bad game, you're still waiting. Other than the pick he threw right at halftime or right before halftime, it hit off a receiver's hands. He kind of forced it in a window. Halftime was coming along. There was not much time left in the second quarter. He was just trying to make a play. But other than that play, the only mistake that I saw him make all game was he underthrew Ladd McConkey on a wide open touchdown pass. And Ladd McConkey still caught it and took it down to the 3-yard line. So if that's the worst thing you're doing all game, it's going to be all right, because the very next play they ran it in, that Edwards scored running the ball in. So if the worst thing you're doing is underthrowing a guy but still getting a 40-yard gain, you're playing some damn good football.
I'll be honest with you. The interception he threw was actually, I thought, his best throw of the night. That was absolutely a dime.
Yeah,
that was a dime, and it was just unfortunate. The ball bounces up. It's before half. You're trying to get down in field goal range, but no, he's been playing outstanding. As I mentioned, his offensive line just continues to give him a clean pocket, and you give it to any quarterback, but especially the way he's been playing, the accuracy with which he throws the football, and the weapons. Obviously, Brock Bowers comes back, and I think sooner than people expected off a tightrope surgery,
and had a touchdown.
Yeah, I thought he looked really good too. I mean, he was moving around well from early on in the game.
Still getting double covered. Just had tightrope surgery. Still getting double covered.
Yeah, it amazes me too, man, how good Ladd McConkey is. Because I'll be honest with you, dude does not look like he'd be a great football player. Like, you just look at him, you're like, I don't know. But
Walk
man,
for sure.
he is legit. He is legit, man. So yeah, I'll be honest. First quarter really entertaining, but you could kind of tell late first quarter, early second quarter, like it was 14-14, and then Georgia scored, made it 21-14, and then you kind of go, I don't think Ole Miss has any shot of stopping these guys, because you knew Ole Miss wasn't gonna run up down the field all night. You knew, like, even if they had more success after that, you knew Georgia's going to get several stops within there. Ole Miss didn't look like they had any shot of getting a stop on them. So it was pretty early, late, or late first quarter, early second quarter. To me, I was like, yeah, Ole Miss, it's not going to happen.
Not a prayer.
Early you're thinking, okay, maybe,
Yeah.
Maybe we hang in for a while, but it just didn't happen. It was Pete Golden had no answers. He underachieved with Alabama's talent. I don't know why anybody would expect him to go over there and overachieve with less talent than he had the previous 5 years. But anyway,
when Jackson Dart threw the interception down the sideline, it was all she wrote. 100% it was over from there, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like you pegged it really. They just didn't have the horses to run with Georgia. I mean, Georgia is just like Alabama, just like Ohio State, some of the other contenders. They're just continuing to peak at the right time and come into their own and play their best football. So, definitely the Missouri result was shocking to me, or surprising, I would say. The Auburn result was surprising to me. I did think this one would be closer, but it wasn't. After watching it, it wasn't that big of a surprise, honestly. The way Georgia can dominate, and they're just so solid on both sides of the football. That they're hard to beat. So, but yeah, I thought they played a fantastic game. Carson Beck again was outstanding. His offensive line continues to deliver. And obviously adding Brock Bowers and getting Bowers and McConkey out there at the same time, which hasn't happened hardly at all this year. That's big for them going forward if they can, keep those guys healthy here down the stretch run.
And then I want to talk about the best game of the day, in my opinion, Florida and LSU. Man, I needed LSU minus 13.5 for my final leg of my parlay. It did end up hitting, obviously, but I was sweating bullets down to the last freaking second. This game had absolutely zero defense in it. But Jaden Daniels has another well of a game. Like you mentioned last week, he gives the defense so much fits. You can't stop him. I mean, if you shut down the routes, he's going to take off running. You rush up the field with the tight ends, he's going to take that lane and take off running. He split the defense. He ran down the side one time, and it looked like he was running a 3.8 40. I mean, he was scooting. But he split the defense on his second touchdown run, ran straight up the middle, made a linebacker miss, and then ran away from the DB. I was like, this dude is unreal. Had a well of a game, dude. I mean, threw for, I believe, 300 yards, ran for 200 yards. Let me check this. Yeah, threw for 372, and he ran for 234, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 3 touchdowns through the air, no interceptions, which is phenomenal. Brian Thomas Jr. continues to shine. Malik Neighbors obviously continues to shine. I think, in my opinion, my personal opinion from the games I've watched, I think Brian Thomas is the best receiver they got. I know Malik Neighbors is the fan favorite down there, and he's quote unquote wide receiver 1. But man, I think Brian Thomas is. He gets over the top of the DBs so often. Jaden Daniels was dropping it in the bucket all night long.
He's so physical as well.
Oh my gosh,
he's such a big body guy.
And you give him a jump ball, he's gonna get it every time. I mean, LSU is so good. They just had a couple of games this year they couldn't get out of. The other team was just a little bit better than them. But man, Jaden Daniels played phenomenal. But on the flip side of it, Graham Mertz had a great game. 311 yards, 1 touchdown. They ran for 4 touchdowns. Trevor Etienne had a great game. I mean, what hurt LSU, in my opinion, was in the first half, their red zone offense was not great. They went for it on the goal line on 4th down, and I believe it was the first quarter, got stuffed and wasn't able to get it. And then then Florida was able to get a 20-yard gain, first play out of the end zone. And then they went for it, or they drove down, had a great drive all the way down to the red zone again, ended up having to come away with a field goal. So first half, red zone offense wasn't there. They were kind of behind the sticks at times. Florida was converting on 3rd down a lot of the times in this game, but LSU found a way to win. They found a way to come away. They won by 18 points. So they played great. And LSU or Florida had a chance to tie it up, or not tie it up, but keep it a one possession game at the end of the game. But they couldn't quite come away with it. Had 4 plays inside the 10-yard line, and they just weren't able to come away with it. LSU batted the ball down for the final play of the game. I went berserk because I won $400. So it was a great game. Nail biter. I was sweating absolute bullets on that one. But this was for sure the best game of the day, and it was a game that I thought was going to get out of hand early. But Florida, they're not quite there yet, but you can tell they're trending up with Billy Napier, and like we've talked about, give him some time. The next 2 years they're going to be a lot better, a lot more competitive. So hats off to Graham Mertz and that offense and Trevor Etienne and what they're able to do. But LSU finds a way to come away with another win, and they're going to be in a really good bowl game as well. And in my opinion, Jaden Daniels is the best player in college football right now, and he deserves the Heisman, no matter if he's in the playoffs or not. And I think that's a little load of crap, because it's supposed to be the best player in the nation, and not if you're in the playoffs or not. And I think for sure, I know that Jaden Daniels is the best player in college football right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, you took the words out of my mouth. Honestly, I was about to say I think he's playing better than anybody in the country right now, regardless of his team being 7-3. I think he deserves the Heisman Trophy. I think the way he's executed this year, I mean, the guy has made a play every single time the ball's been in his hands, whether it's throwing it, running it. I mean, he's just been absolutely terrific this entire season. So I just, and obviously, if he goes to the draft, he's a senior. He's not going to be the first quarterback taken, but there's not a quarterback in the country that is playing better than him for the totality of this season. So, if that's what the Heisman Trophy is supposed to be, which it is, I think he deserves it. I said it during the middle of the Alabama LSU game. I was like, win or lose, in my opinion, I think he should get it, just based on the way he has played consistently elite this entire season. So he is so fun to watch. I mean, as you mentioned his stat line the other night, just a sensational night. It's crazy to me. He's a guy, if you'll notice when he runs, he always looks over his shoulder to see how close the defender is behind him. This guy he doesn't lose speed when he looks behind him. Like, for example, if you're driving a car and you're constantly looking in your mirror, you're naturally going to slow down. You know what I mean? This guy's looking in his mirror the entire time he's running down the field and it's pulling away from people. I mean, he is like the most deceptively fast player I've seen in a long time. Like, you see him running down the field and it's like, man, dude, he doesn't look like he's moving as fast as he is, but he is covering a lot of ground in a hurry. So, yeah, he's just such a dynamic player to watch. I absolutely have loved watching him play this year. I think he deserves the Heisman. He probably won't get it, but I think he should get it because I think he's consistently been the best performer in college football this year. He, as I said before, he puts your defense in so much of a bind. The way he can scramble, quarterback runs have been really good for them. And then obviously he's been one of, if not the most accurate passers in the country this year as well. So a lot of fun to watch. Like you said, this was a really entertaining game. Defense was optional, but which has been that way with LSU all year and kind of with Florida as well. So I guess this wasn't a huge surprise. I was sweating with you though at the end, man. I really thought LSU was about to give them that last touchdown, cut it back to 10, and knock you out of $400, man. When you get 4 shots from the 5-yard line, 90% of the time you're scoring, especially when you look at the fact that they're up 17. They're not really trying as hard as they really would be. And when you have 40 seconds and you got 4 pass plays from the 5, I was like, man, this is going to be heartbreaking for Carr. And they're going to knock him out at the last second here, give up a little cheapy touchdown and knock him out $400. But they held the line, man. Give them credit. And
absolutely,
obviously you got to cash that ticket. And LSU got to cash a cover and a win against Florida. And I do want to shout out Graham Mertz as well. He's played extremely well this year himself, and
Oh yeah.
I think he's thrown 2,700 yards, 18 touchdowns, 2 picks. I think so. He's had a really nice year for Florida as well, and obviously hasn't went the way they really wanted, but he's been a encouraging sign for them this year. So I'm curious to see how both these teams kind of end their regular seasons.
And then next week, week 11, or actually it's week 12, it's really a shape up week for everybody, a get right week, before their big rivalry games. But there is one game. There's a couple of conference games, but there's one game this weekend that's the big game in the SEC, and that is Georgia and Tennessee at Neyland Stadium. I'm not sure the kickoff time. Do you know the kickoff time?
Yes, CBS 2:30.
2:30 CBS game. Georgia is a 10.5-point favorite right now. Hammer it. Put the mortgage on it. Take out another mortgage, put in on it. Hammer it, hammer it, hammer it. I'm telling you right now, Tennessee is not going to be able to run on Georgia. They were not able to run on Missouri. I predicted it last week. They are not going to be able to run on Georgia. They're not going to be able to throw the ball all around the yard. It's probably going to be a lot like this Georgia-Ole Miss game was. Tennessee's probably going to start out quick, start out hot. They might get a few points. They are not going to be able to drive the ball down the field against Georgia all night long. I don't care where it's at. I don't care if it's in Athens. I don't care if it's in Neyland. I don't care if they're playing in the backyard of a school. It ain't happening. Hammer Georgia minus 10.5. I'm honestly probably going to put a hundo on it after we get off this podcast. That's going to happen. I can almost guarantee it. Georgia is head and shoulders better than this Tennessee team. Missouri clearly better than this Tennessee team, and they've played Georgia about as best as anybody has all year. Georgia is going to absolutely embarrass Tennessee. They did it last year when Tennessee was a much better team. They stuffed them. They weren't not able to do anything that was expected of them going into this game. Georgia's going to win this game by 17 or more. I'm calling it right now. I wouldn't be shocked if there was another 50-17 win or 52-17, whatever the final score was in the game this past weekend. This Georgia team is peaking at the right moment. They're not. They don't make many mistakes. They're 100% going to be up for this game, and they're going to handle business. This is honestly the last team that stands in their way of having an undefeated season. I know Georgia Tech's been pretty good. They've had some upsets. They've covered a lot this year against some good teams, but this is their last test before the SEC championship game, and they're not going to let anybody get in their way of going in there unscathed. So I think Georgia covers this 10.5 2 or 3 times, to be real with you.
Yeah, I just don't think, like you said, Tennessee's not really going to be able to run the ball on Georgia, and I just don't think they have the quarterback play to get it done either. I just don't think they're much of a threat, in the pass game, and that's what it takes to beat a team like Georgia. And I just don't think Tennessee has the setup to be able to pull that off. So, like you said, it may be a little close early. I mean, obviously, Tennessee, coming off a big loss. I mean, they're going to give it their best effort. Obviously, I mean, this is their one last big hope for the year to pull off a big victory. So they're going to give it everything they have, but I just don't think they have the quarterback play or the weapons on the outside to be able to really threaten Georgia. They're not going to be able to rely on the run game like they have in a lot of their games this year. So, yeah, I just don't think this one's going to end up being particularly close. Thought it may have a chance to be, but after last week, it just wasn't happening, and I just don't see it being that close in the second half, particularly. I mean, I don't think they'll beat by 40 or anything, but I
wouldn't be shocked.
I don't see it being a really competitive game. So I've got Georgia minus 10, so I like that a lot. I actually like Auburn minus 23 against New Mexico State. I think they're going to hang a pretty good number on them. I think they're going to get some good work in offensively. So I think that number's a little low in my opinion. So that's one I'm going to be looking at closely as well. We appreciate everybody tuning in. hope y'all like the video, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're trying to get our viewership and our subscribers up. So we really appreciate that. We're going to be covering the coaching carousel very closely here. Hopefully, we'll have some news by the next time we talk. We'll come back and recap Week 12 games, and then we will have our 100th episode, which is very fitting, going into rivalry week previews. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, I would not be surprised at all if we don't have more coaching carousel news on the way here shortly. I think there's a lot of dominoes left to fall, and I think it's really only getting started. So we'll be keeping up with that, and we'll come back to talk about it next week when and if that happens. But again, we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see y'all next week.
Thank you, guys.